Welcome back to the deep dive. Ready to dive into some computer networking and security.
Always right. Looks like you've got a stack of material there.
Yeah, got some excerpts from Hacking Networking and Security by John Medicine and a transcript from a David Bombal YouTube video. I'm really fascinated by not just how networks work, but how that knowledge is well used.
Right. How it can be used both defensively and offensively.
Yeah, exactly. So I was reading in Medicine about how fiber optic cables are basically the backbone of the internet.
Oh, yeah. Those tiny strands of glass carrying data across continents. It's incredible how they can transmit signals so far without losing quality.
It really is. It's like the digital equivalent of, I don't know, shouting across a continent and the person on the other side hears you perfectly.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I like that analogy. And that ability to transmit data over vast distances is really what's transformed the internet. It's why we can have crystal clear video calls, stream high definition movies, all without a hitch.
I mean, even just a few years ago, that was sounded like science fiction.
Right. And all of that is built on what's called the client-server model.
Ah, yes, the client-server model. Medicine uses a great example to explain it. A hospital's data processing system.
A perfect example. The client computers, like the ones at the nurses' stations, are constantly sending patient information to a central server, which processes and stores the data.
So the server is like the brain of the operation, and the clients are like the limbs gathering and sending information.
Exactly. And this model isn't just for hospitals. It's the foundation of how we interact with websites, apps, you name it.
It's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot more to networking than just clients and servers, right?
Oh, absolutely. Medicine goes into detail about all the other key components like hubs, bridges, routers. It's a whole ecosystem.
It's amazing how much complexity there is behind something we use every day without even thinking about it.
It really is. And what's interesting is that even something as simple as an Ethernet cable can have an impact on network design.
An Ethernet cable? Really? How so?
Well, did you know that if the cable is too long, the signal can degrade, impacting network performance?
I had no idea. So it's not just about the software, the physical stuff matters too.
Absolutely. Everything's connected. And speaking of understanding how data travels, medicine touches on the OSI model.
The OSI model, what's that?
It's a conceptual framework that breaks down network communication into 7 layers, each responsible for a different task to ensure data gets where it needs to go. It's like a layered cake.
Okay, I can visualize that. So each layer has its own specific job to do.
Right. And the beauty of the OSI model is that it provides a standardized way to understand and troubleshoot network communication.
So it's like a universal language for anyone working with networks.
Exactly. It's crucial when you're dealing with the complexities of the internet.
Speaking of the internet, medicine dives into its evolution and all the advantages it's brought us.
It's amazing how much the internet has changed the world, right?
It really is. He talked about how versatile internet communication is, especially for managing things like emergency incidents in real time.
Oh, absolutely. The ability to share information instantly during a crisis is invaluable.
It's literally life-saving in some cases. But it's not all sunshine and roses, is it?
Well, no. Medicine also delves into the security concerns that come with all this connectivity, especially with email.
Oh, right, phishing attacks. I've heard some scary stories about those.
It's a constant cat and mouse game between those trying to protect information and those trying to steal it.
So it's like an ongoing arms race with both sides constantly developing new techniques.
Exactly. And while email's a big target, we can't overlook the World Wide Web itself.
I mean, that's how most of us experience the internet, right?
Yeah.
Through websites.
Right. And those websites, behind all the flashy graphics and interactive elements, are built with code languages like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
It's easy to forget that it's all just code at the end of the day.
It is, but that code can be manipulated, which is where network security comes in.
Makes sense. I was reading about the evolution of security algorithms, specifically those used to protect wireless networks, WEP, WPA, and WPA2. Medicine says that WP was so easy to crack, it was quickly abandoned.
Oh yeah, WEP was like building a house out of paper, not very secure.
So then came WPA, a much stronger protocol, and finally WPA2, which uses AES encryption.
And AES is a serious encryption algorithm. It's even used by the US government to protect sensitive data.
Wow, so it must be pretty strong.
It is. It just goes to show how quickly technology evolves, both in terms of what it can do and how it can be exploited.
Speaking of evolving technologies, medicine also covers dynamic IP addresses.
Dynamic IP addresses are incredibly important for the way the internet works. Imagine if every device had a fixed IP address.
That would be a nightmare to manage.
It would. Dynamic IP addresses are constantly changing, assigned by DHCP servers.
DHCP server, so it's like a digital post office, making sure every device gets its own unique address.
That's a great way to think about it.
But there's another protocol, FTP, or File Transfer Protocol. I read that it's not secure by design.
Yeah, FTP is like sending a postcard. Anyone can read it along the way. For sensitive data, you'd want to use FTPS, which adds encryption.
Oh, I see. So it's like sending your message in a sealed envelope instead.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Now, this might be a basic question, but how does the internet actually work at a fundamental level?
Well, it uses a method called packet switching, which is pretty ingenious.
Packet switching.
It's like sending a message in pieces, with each piece finding its own way to the destination.
Oh, interesting. But what if those pieces arrive out of order?
Don't worry, there are mechanisms in place to reassemble those packets at the receiving end, so the message gets put back together in the right order.
Okay, so it's like having a digital puzzle master at the destination.
Exactly. And this method is much more efficient than the older method of circuit switching.
So it's what allows millions of people to be online at the same time without everything crashing.
Exactly. It's a fundamental part of how the modern internet works.
But of course, there are people who try to exploit those systems, right? The hackers.
Right. Medicine outlines a typical hacking process with 5 main steps.
Okay, what are they?
Reconnaissance, scanning, gaining access, maintaining access, and covering tracks.
So it's like a digital heist.
It is. Each step is crucial to the success of the hack. They start by gathering information, then they probe for vulnerabilities, then they break in, stay hidden, and try to cover their tracks.
It's fascinating how strategic it all is. And he also mentions that hackers often use scripting languages like BAAH and Python. Why those languages?
Well, those languages are perfect for automating tasks and exploiting vulnerabilities. Python's especially popular because it has pre-built libraries and modules that can be used for a variety of hacking tasks.
So it's like having a toolbox full of specialized gadgets for breaking into digital systems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But luckily, there are people working just as hard to protect those systems.
Right. I was reading about the CIA triad confidentiality, integrity, and availability as the foundation of cybersecurity.
The 3 pillars of a secure digital world.
Confidentiality means keeping sensitive data secret. Integrity means making sure it hasn't been tampered with. And availability means authorized users can access it when they need to.
You got it.
But how are those principles implemented in the real world?
Well, we have things like encryption for confidentiality, hashing for integrity, and DDoS protection for availability.
So it's a multi-layer defense system.
Exactly. It's about protecting the data itself, making sure it's accurate, and making sure it's accessible to the right people.
Makes sense. But protecting data isn't just about preventing unauthorized access. It's also about accountability.
Right, and that's where non-repudiation comes in.
Non-repudiation.
It means you can't deny taking a specific action. Like if you send an email, you can't later claim you didn't send it.
Ah, so it's like a digital trail of breadcrumbs that can't be erased.
Exactly. Digital signatures are a common way to implement non-repudiation.
Okay, so we've got all these defenses in place, but what about the attacks themselves?
Well, there's a whole range of cyber attacks out there. Medicine covers quite a few, including phishing, SQL injection, MP spoofing, ARP spoofing, and denial of service attacks.
Wow. It's a bit overwhelming to think about all the different ways someone could attack a system.
It can be, but understanding those different types of attacks is the first step in defending against them.
So let's break it down. We've talked about phishing, which are those deceptive emails designed to trick people into revealing sensitive information. What about SQL injection?
SQL injection is all about exploiting vulnerabilities in websites to gain control over databases.
Oh, so it's like a hacker sneaking in through a back door to steal or manipulate data.
Exactly. Then you've got MA spoofing, where an attacker changes their device's MA address to bypass security or impersonate another device.
So it's like creating a fake ID for your device.
Yep. And then there's ARP spoofing, which is a way for an attacker to redirect traffic intended for one device to their own device.
So they're essentially intercepting communications.
Exactly. And finally, there are denial of service, or DOS attacks.
Ah, those are the ones that flood a server with traffic, right?
Right. Imagine a website getting so many requests that it crashes and becomes inaccessible.
So it's like a digital traffic jam, preventing legitimate users from getting through.
Exactly. It's a very effective way to disrupt a service.
It's amazing how many ways there are to attack a system.
It really is. But luckily, there are just as many ways to defend against those attacks.
And that's what we'll explore further as we continue our deep dive.
Sounds good to me. Let's get to it. So we've talked about DHCP servers automatically assigning IP addresses.
Yeah, like a digital post office.
Right. But think about this in the world of the Internet of Things, where everything's connected.
Like refrigerators, doorbells, everything.
Exactly. Managing those IP addresses becomes a huge security challenge.
No, I see what you mean. A rogue device could easily slip through the cracks.
Exactly. So DHCP isn't just about convenience, it's a security issue too.
It all comes back to security, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
And speaking of security, remember those denial of service attacks?
The ones that flood a server with traffic.
Yeah. Imagine that happening to a major online retailer during, say, Black Friday.
Their website crashes, customers can't buy anything.
Millions in lost revenue. That's the real-world impact of these attacks.
It's like a digital hostage situation.
That's a great analogy. But let's shift gears a bit. What about attacks that exploit human psychology?
You mean social engineering, like phishing emails.
Exactly. Phishing, pretexting, baiting. It's all about manipulation.
It's scary how easy it is to fall for some of those scams.
It is. And the techniques are constantly evolving.
So what can we do to protect ourselves?
Education is key. People need to be aware of these tactics.
Right, like knowing what to look for in a phishing email.
Exactly. It's like giving people a radar to detect those digital con artists.
Makes sense. But besides education, what about more technical approaches?
Well, there's penetration testing.
Penetration testing. Isn't that like ethical hacking?
It is. Security professionals simulate real-world attacks to find vulnerabilities.
So it's like hiring a team of ethical hackers to break into your system.
That's the idea. It's a crucial part of any good security strategy.
I guess it's better to find those weaknesses yourself before someone else does.
Exactly. And medicine talks about different types of penetration testing: black box, gray box, white box. It all depends on how much information the tester has about the system.
So black box is like breaking into a house without knowing anything about it.
Exactly. Gray box is like having a floor plan but not knowing the security code. And white box is like having the blueprints and the keys.
So you're basically giving them all the information to see if they can still find a way in.
Exactly. It's a way to test your defenses from every angle.
Makes sense. But it sounds like cybersecurity requires a lot of specialized knowledge.
It does. But luckily, there are resources to help people learn.
Like what?
Well, medicine mentions Kali Linux, which is a specialized operating system designed for penetration testing.
Oh, right, Kali Linux. It comes preloaded with a ton of security tools.
Exactly. It's like a playground for security enthusiasts.
But of course, it's important to use those tools ethically.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, and it can be used for both good and evil.
Speaking of investigating, what about network forensics? I imagine that plays a big role in cybersecurity.
Oh, absolutely. It's like digital detective work.
So if there's a security breach, network forensic investigators come in and try to figure out what happened.
Exactly. They analyze log files, network traffic, all sorts of digital evidence.
It's like piecing together a puzzle to find out how the attackers got in, what they stole, and who they might be.
You got it. It's a fascinating field, but it requires a lot of specialized skills.
It sounds like it.
And we keep coming back to this, but cryptography plays such a big role in all of this.
Yeah, we talked about encryption and hash functions, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all.
Well, think of cryptography as the art of protecting information. It's all about keeping data secret and secure.
So it's about making sure only the right people have access to the information.
Exactly. And there are different types of cryptography, each with its own strengths and weaknesses.
Like what?
Well, you've got symmetric key encryption, where the same key is used to encrypt and decrypt the data.
Okay, so it's like having one key that fixes both the lock and the unlock.
Right. And then there's asymmetric key encryption, where there are two keys, a public key and a private key.
Oh, I've heard about that. It's like having a mailbox with two slots, one for sending mail and one for receiving it.
Exactly. Anyone can use the public key to send you encrypted messages, but only you, with your private key, can decrypt them.
That makes sense. And what about those hashing algorithms we talked about earlier?
Hashing is all about creating a unique fingerprint of a file or message. It's a way to ensure that the data hasn't been tampered with.
So if even one tiny bit of the data changes, the hash will be different and you'll know something's wrong.
Exactly. It's a great way to verify the integrity of data.
This is all incredibly fascinating. But it's also a bit overwhelming to think about how much goes into securing our data and communications.
It can be. But remember, even small steps can make a big difference.
Like what?
Well, one simple thing you can do is use a VPN, especially when you're on a public Wi-Fi network.
VPNs, yeah. Those create a secure and encrypted connection over the internet, right?
Exactly. It's like having a private tunnel for your data to travel through, protecting it from prying eyes.
So even if someone's snooping on the network, they can't see what I'm doing.
That's the idea. And there are tons of VPN services out there, both free and paid.
So how do I choose a good one?
It's important to do your research and pick a reputable provider that has a strong track record of protecting user privacy. Be wary of free VPNs. They often come with hidden costs.
Like what?
Things like data logging, bandwidth limitations, or even injecting ads into your browsing. It's better to invest in a paid VPN service that you can trust.
Okay, so it's like paying for peace of mind.
Exactly. Your online privacy and security are worth it. But remember, even with a VPN, you should still be cautious about what you do online.
Right, because no security measure is foolproof.
Exactly. There are always new threats emerging, so it's important to stay informed and proactive about your security. And one area where the threat landscape is constantly evolving is wireless networks.
Wireless networks. Those are convenient, but I always get a little nervous using them, especially in public places.
And for good reason. Wireless networks can be particularly vulnerable because those signals are just floating around in the air for anyone to intercept.
I was reading in medicine about man-in-the-middle attacks, where a hacker secretly intercepts communication between two devices.
Yeah, it's like someone listening in on your phone call without you knowing.
That's scary.
It is. And it can happen pretty easily if you're not careful, especially on those unsecured public Wi-Fi networks.
So what can we do to protect ourselves?
Well, using a VPN is a great first step. That encrypts your traffic, making it much harder for someone to snoop on your communications.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about those rogue access points I've heard about? Those fake Wi-Fi hotspots set up by attackers.
Ah, yes, rogue access points. Those are tricky because they often have legitimate-sounding names like free airport Wi-Fi.
So you think you're connecting to a safe network, but you're actually walking right into a trap.
Exactly. And once you're connected, the attacker can potentially do all sorts of nasty things like intercept your traffic, steal your credentials, or even install malware on your device.
Wow, it's like a digital spider web. So how can we avoid these rogue access points?
Be very cautious about which networks you connect to, especially in public places. If a network doesn't require a password, it's probably not safe. And if the name seems a bit off, double check with the staff to make sure it's a legitimate hotspot.
Good advice. So we've talked a lot about security threats, but let's dive into some of the technical concepts that both hackers and cybersecurity professionals need to understand.
Oh, definitely. The foundation is key.
Right. I remember watching Bombal's video, and he really breaks down some of those fundamental concepts, like the difference between a port number and a socket.
Ah, yes. Those terms are often confused.
They confused me when I was first learning about networking. Can you remind me what the difference is?
Sure. Think of a port number as a door on a building. Each door has a unique number, and each door leads to a specific room or department within the building.
So different services and applications on a computer use different port numbers.
Exactly. For example, web servers typically use port 80, while email servers often use port 25.
Okay, so that's a port number. What about a socket?
A socket is a combination of a building address and a door number.
So it's not just about the port number, but also the IP address of the computer.
Exactly. A socket represents a unique communication endpoint on a network. It allows devices to send and receive data to specific applications on specific computers.
Okay, that makes more sense. And then Bombal talked about ephemeral ports, which are dynamically assigned.
Right, those are like temporary phone numbers. They're used for a specific call and then released.
So it's how multiple clients can connect to the same server at the same time without any conflicts.
Exactly. Now, understanding these concepts like port numbers and sockets is essential for both hackers and cybersecurity professionals.
Right, I remember medicine talking about port scanning as a technique used by hackers to find open ports.
Exactly. It's a reconnaissance technique that allows them to identify potential points of entry.
So it's like a burglar checking all the doors and windows to see which ones are unlocked.
That's a great analogy. And that's why firewalls are so important. They can be configured to block traffic to specific ports, making it harder for attackers to get in.
So it's like installing a security system to protect those open doors and windows.
Exactly. And Bombal actually demonstrates how to use a tool called Nmap, which is a popular port scanning tool.
So we can see how hackers actually use these tools.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, both the good guys and the bad guys. And speaking of tools, Bombal also shows how to use Wireshark to capture and analyze network traffic.
We talked about Wireshark earlier, right? It's like a microscope for network traffic.
Exactly. It allows you to see the details of each packet of data that's being transmitted and received.
It's amazing how much information you can glean from those packets,
Yeah.
but it also sounds pretty technical.
It can be, but it's an incredibly powerful tool for anyone working with networks, whether they're troubleshooting problems or investigating security incidents.
It really is. Wireshark can show you the source and destination IP addresses, the port numbers, the protocols, even the actual data being transmitted.
It's like reading someone's mail, but for network traffic.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about some of the basic concepts, but what about the actual hacking techniques themselves?
Well, Medicine's book really gets into the nitty-gritty of the hacker's toolkit.
Okay, and he talks about the importance of scripting languages like BASH and Python.
Right, those languages are essential for automating tasks and creating more sophisticated attacks.
I get that they're powerful, but I'm not a programmer, so I'm a little fuzzy on how they're actually used in hacking.
Okay, well, imagine you want to try a bunch of different passwords to break into an account. You could do it manually, typing in each password one by one.
That would take forever.
Exactly. But with a scripting language, you can write a program to automatically try thousands of passwords per second.
Oh, I see. So you can automate those repetitive tasks.
Exactly. And Python is especially popular because it has tons of pre-built libraries and modules that can be used for all sorts of hacking tasks.
So it's like having a toolbox full of ready-made hacking gadgets.
That's a great way to put it.
And then Medicine dives into Kali Linux, which we've talked about a bit already. It's a specialized operating system designed for security professionals and ethical hackers.
Yeah, Kali Linux is like the ultimate hacking playground. It comes preloaded with all sorts of tools for penetration testing, vulnerability analysis, forensics, you name it.
So it's basically a one-stop shop for all things cybersecurity.
Pretty much. But of course, it's important to remember that these tools can be used for both good and evil.
Right. With great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. It all comes down to how you use that knowledge in those tools.
So we've talked about some of the tools and techniques used by hackers, but what can everyday people do to protect themselves from these attacks?
Well, being aware of social engineering techniques is a huge first step.
Right. Those are those psychological tricks that hackers use to manipulate people into giving up sensitive information.
Exactly, like those phishing emails that try to trick you into clicking on a malicious link.
Or those phone calls where someone pretends to be from your bank.
Exactly. So being cautious and skeptical is crucial. Don't click on links from senders you don't recognize, and never give out personal information over the phone unless you're absolutely sure who you're talking to.
It's all about being vigilant and not taking anything at face value.
Exactly. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is.
Okay, good advice. Now, besides being aware of social engineering, are there any other practical steps we can take to improve our security?
Absolutely. One of the most important things is to keep your software up to date.
Oh, right. Those annoying software updates that always seem to pop up at the worst possible time.
I know, they can be a pain, but those updates often include security patches that fix vulnerabilities that hackers could exploit.
So it's like patching holes in your digital defenses.
Exactly. And it's not just your operating system that needs to be updated, but also your web browser, your antivirus software, and any other applications you use regularly.
Okay, so update everything. Got it. What else?
Another important step is to use strong passwords.
Oh, yeah. Passwords. I'm terrible at remembering those.
I know, it can be tough, but a strong password is one of the simplest and most effective ways to protect your accounts.
So what makes a strong password?
A good password should be at least 12 characters long and include a mix of uppercase and lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols. And try to avoid using common words or phrases that hackers could easily guess.
Okay, so password 123 is out.
Definitely. And don't use the same password for multiple accounts.
Right, because if one account gets compromised, then all your accounts are at risk.
Exactly. It's like using the same key for your house, your car, and your office. If someone gets a hold of that key, they have access to everything.
Makes sense. Any other password tips?
Consider using a password manager, which can generate and store strong passwords for you so you don't have to remember them all.
Oh, that's a good idea. I've heard of those, but I haven't tried one yet.
They can be lifesavers. They make it much easier to manage all your passwords securely.
Okay, I'll definitely check those out. So we've talked about social engineering, software updates, and strong passwords. Any other essential security tips?
Be careful about what information you share online. Think before you post.
Oh, right, social media. It's so easy to overshare sometimes.
It is. And hackers can use that information to target you with phishing attacks or even identity theft. So be mindful of what you're posting and be careful about who you're connecting with online.
Good point. So it's all about being aware of the risks and taking sensible precautions.
Exactly. Cybersecurity doesn't have to be complicated. It's all about being proactive and taking simple steps to protect yourself and your data.
Well, that was an incredible deep dive. We've learned so much about computer networking, security threats, hacking techniques, and the tools and strategies we can use to stay safe online.
It's a vast and complex field, but I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
I definitely feel more informed and empowered, but I also realize this is just the beginning. There's always more to learn, right?
Absolutely. The world of cybersecurity is constantly evolving, with new threats emerging all the time. So stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe out there in the digital world.
Great advice. Thanks for guiding us through this fascinating journey.
It was my pleasure. And remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about computer networking and security, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself and navigate the digital world with confidence.